Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today I am super thrilled to be joined by the fantastic Mark Parello. Mark I've known for a number of years because once upon a time we shared the same office building together, and since then his business has grown astronomically. He is the co-founder and managing director of King Street Wealth Management, an integrated financial advisory and discretionary investment management business based in central Manchester, but operating, I believe, nationwide and also potentially now even internationally. Mark has had a fantastic career. He's qualified as both a financial planner and a discretionary investment manager in addition, and it's also been authorised by all of the big four accountancy firms to provide investment advice for partners. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hi Leila, thanks very much for that amazing introduction.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. And you gave me a challenge there because I tell you what, that is a mouthful, what you do for a living. And I guess for those who perhaps haven't heard of you and for your firm, which I know has grown a lot over the many years that I have known you, tell me a little bit about it and what have you been up to of late since we last saw one another?
Okay, so I'll tell you a bit about my background first of all, a little bit, and then how the business came about and what it is that we actually do. So my background is private banking, financial planning, and discretionary investment management. And I've been in the industry now for over 20 years. And it was about 5 years ago, so early 2015, I looked back over my career and I just thought there's a better way of doing this. And when I say a better way of doing this, I mean how to provide wealth management advice. Mm-hmm. Most people think about dealing with people who work in financial services. They think that our industry is complex, opaque, high charging. Worse than that, most people don't know what they are being charged. And in a lot of instances, people are just being sold a product with no plan to back it up. So in business, I asked myself the question, how can we solve those issues? So everything we do now challenges that status quo, and we think differently. And the way we challenge the status quo is that we've created a business that provides, very simply, a better service, better results for less cost. And what we do is we work mainly with, as you mentioned, business owners, people who sold businesses, hiring professionals, and we work with them to create life plans for themselves. So we would never sit down in front of a client and try and sell them a return. It's all about what the client wants to do with the rest of their life. Because what actually is really important to our clients is, can I do all the things I want to do in my life and never run out of money? So we work with clients to help them build those plans, create a plan and a structure that will support all those goals and ambitions. And then we have the investment management part of our business, which helps preserve and grow their wealth.
That does make absolute sense. So you basically help people accumulate long-term wealth in a sustainable way and also in an ethical way, which I think is very, very important, and more important, especially as our millennial and zillennial leaders and such like start to go throughout their careers. But I think people are starting to plan earlier, and I think it sounds like also you take some of the complexity out of those perhaps formerly complex, archaic type of industries. I think when we think of, as an ordinary person, think of wealth management, we think, oh, that must be reserved for the echelons of the very rich and the very famous. But actually what you're saying is, this is something that entrepreneurs, of which there are growing numbers of entrepreneurs in the UK, are really actually being able to kind of engage with. It's safe, it's stable, it is kind of, allowing them to plan for the future that they want in their personal life. Because let's face it, that is just as important as the work that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely right. And in terms of our future goals, and the business is now just about 4.5 years old.
Wow. God, it seems a long time since you started.
Oh, it does, but it's gone by in a blink. It really has. And the progress has been phenomenal. Just because we are doing exactly that, providing a better service, better results for less cost, it hasn't been difficult to bring new clients into the business. We made our first acquisition over the Christmas period, and we're in the process of integrating that business with our own, which has actually been a pretty simple process, just because we can show the clients the increase in service that they're getting. reducing the cost to them, while at the same time actually increasing the revenue into our business by 4 times.
Wow.
Charging, yeah. So it's a really good investment for us, and it's a great move for those clients too.
Excellent. And I have to ask, Mark, and again, forgive me for doing so on the podcast, but you've always struck me as not only, charismatic individual, but very, very driven. And I know we've had many a conversation in the King Street kind of lounge, having a coffee, kind of saying, how did you end up being, I guess, is driven? Is there anything that perhaps stems back to your personal background, which I would love perhaps for you to share with some of our listeners?
Yeah, of course. So my motivations and drives have changed through the years, but where that burning desire comes from initially was that I had a pretty challenging childhood. So my mum suffered from severe mental illness her whole life. And I was taken into care at the age of 15. And effectively, when I was very lucky, and I feel very lucky in that I've always liked to read. I love reading. And what I was able to do was think my way out and read my way out of where I started from. There's always been a desire to do well. And when I was growing up, I was always told that I would never amount to anything and I was lazy and all the rest of it. So when I don't tend to look back a great deal, but there's 2 things that are important when understanding anyone's drive, actually. So one of the questions, and these are the things that I've learned from listening to a chap called Tony Robbins, who is
I love Tony Robbins.
So he asks 2 questions. The first one is, whose love did you crave when you were growing up? Was it your mum or was it your dad? Now, for me, it was my mum, because my dad just wasn't around. And the second question is, who did you have to be in order to receive that love? And for me, I had to be the hardest working, I had to be the fittest, the strongest, the hardest working. So that's obviously carried with me my whole life. I would never say that I was necessarily the most academically bright person in the world, but I have never met anyone that I couldn't outwork. And it was applying those principles to everything that I do. It's made me a complete obsessive, and there are both massive positives to that, but there are also quite a few negatives too. So it has been a real learning process. But what drove me at first was to move away from where I started from. What's driving me now is something entirely different. So I'm very blessed now. I've got an amazing wife, 2 fit and healthy young sons, I've got my own business, and what I'm trying to create is a platform that I describe as to help my younger self. What I mean by that is, I'm sure you've heard of Simon Sinek. He says, start with why, but I'm sort of ending on my why, aren't I? As I mentioned, when I was growing up, there wasn't anyone really to teach me anything. So what I would like to do is I want to engage with people who are right at their start of their wealth creation journey, who might be just leaving school, just leaving university. They don't invest because actually saving's boring and investment's boring. But while saving and investment might be boring, having money isn't. Now, I've had none, less than none. And I'm now very, very fortunate. And I know where I feel more fulfilled. Now, if we can create and engage with people at that stage in their life and help them understand and to think long term, to understand the compound effects, and give them the capability to save into something that's low cost, transparent, and effective, not only are we improving the industry a bit, but we're changing people's lives. So that's what's driving me. And it doesn't just have to be a financial education, Leila. It's more than that. So the quality of our lives can be very much dependent on the questions we ask ourselves and others. So I use the example of losing weight, because when my second son was born 8 years ago, I weighed 118 kilos, which in old money is about 18 stone.
Wow.
Yeah. And I used to ask myself the question, why does everything I eat turn to fat? And my brain would say, because you're a pig and you can't help yourself, and all these sorts of negative things. But when you change the question to how can I lose weight and enjoy the process, your brain gives you different answers. So I'm now doing triathlons, city cycling events. I'm in the gym most days, and it's completely changed me, physically. But once you can apply those questions to every part of your life, your brain just gives you much better answers, and you can change your life doing that. That's what's driving me now.
Wow. Do you know, there's so much in there from what you said, and that's really, really exciting. I mean, I remember you coming into the office and kind of have your, you know, your protein and everything like that in a suitcase, which always made me laugh a lot. But I think, you know, firstly, thank you very, very much for sharing some of the personal kind of, you know, details of your life growing up, because I know that can't have been easy at all, because I know you were, you know, clearly acting in very much of a support capacity. And you know what you described there is really a really kind of beautiful upward shift when it comes to social mobility. And I think you know, some of the most inspirational stories are, you know, almost those, without sounding too cheesy here, those kind of those rags to riches stories. Now you know, both of us make no bones about the fact that, you know, look, money is not the most important thing. Our health, our wellness, our happiness is. But I do think sometimes as a nation, and whether it is kind of a British thing that we've adopted, it's almost a bit embarrassing to talk about money. And you know, there's no shame in talking about money. There's no shame in saying that you want to have wealth, because ultimately, you know, let's face it, having some kind of wealth and sustainability does actually allow you to have options, allows you to have your children to have options. And so, you know, for me, much as it is about doing good, and I know this is that you're very, very keen on this as well, because you're very much about the people, you're very much about the entrepreneurs, you're very much about the relationships, is all of those pieces packaged up alongside sustainable, ethical wealth creation. And you know, there's no harm in wanting to do good whilst also, on the other hand, wanting to make money. And I think we should kind of almost detach ourselves from that fear of, oh, I'm a bit ashamed to say I want to make money, because there's just nothing wrong with it at all. And I think you know, the story that you shared there, I you know, I think it's wonderful. And honestly, I'm just bursting with joy that the business has gone so well for you, and you know, also that you came from such humble beginnings, because it really shows and inspires others, and hopefully it does to those who are tuning in today as well, thinking, hey, you know, maybe I could be like Mark one day. Maybe I could have you know, 2 lovely boys, an Italian wife, and you know, business is doing well, because you know, it's not all about the educational qualifications. You know, it's about being street savvy.
It's about persistence. I mean, I actually spent the first 14 years of my career in financial services looking for a way out. I knew I wanted to be in business, but so the typical individual within our industry is going to be white, middle class, middle-aged, there or thereabouts. And I didn't fit. And there were numerous instances throughout my career where I was singled out because I didn't fit. While I was generating the right results, I didn't fit the typical mold of the wealth manager in the firms that I was working with. And my head and my heart were never really aligned, because my moral compass was often pointing in a different direction to the firm that I was working with. And when I say the firm, it's normally the individuals that it was only when a friend of mine said to me, Mark, you've been doing this for a long time. Why don't you create something within this industry? Because I was blaming the industry for being the wrong industry for me. But actually, this industry is absolutely the right one for me to be. You can find the environment. And this business is now a reflection of my personality. For the first time in my working career, my head and my heart are completely aligned. And when that happens, you can achieve incredible things. Yeah, I was out with a couple of uni friends this weekend who we catch up a couple of times a year. And one of the things one of the lads said to me, he said, Mark, I haven't said this before, but I really respect you because you never gave up. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I know you've been trying to set up a business. I've seen you try and fail and try and fail and try and fail, but you never gave up. But the thing is, you keep trying and you have a desire to create something and a belief that you can do it, it will happen at the right time.
Absolutely. You can tip the scales in your balance, because ultimately, you know, it's almost like a numbers game, isn't it? You know, first of all, we learn, I think, most of all from our failures. And I mean, God knows you've heard about many of mine before the successes came. But, you know, you've got to keep picking yourself up and dusting yourself off again, because ultimately the more times you try, the more times you're, one, likely to learn what not to do, and second, you know, you learn what you enjoy. And I think it's just, you know, so wonderful that your head and heart are aligned, because I think, you know, it's quite sad when you know, when I speak to execs and I think, you know, they're unhappy with what they do, they're earning a fortune, etc. You know, but they're working for an unscrupulous business, or they just don't feel happy with perhaps where they've ended up almost. And just to touch on your earlier point as well there, it kind of breaks my heart when you say you didn't feel like you fitted into the classic kind of the financial services mold, because and again and I'm sure there's many people who can really relate to that, in the world of exec search, which is another reason. Well, I love it, but it's not full-time everything that I do. Obviously, there's a DAR global business, but I find myself walking into boardrooms and going to many events, and the managing directors, the CEOs, the chairman, the board, the non-exec fleet would be all middle-aged white guys. And again, important, just as a disclaimer here for both Mark and myself, this is nothing against middle-aged white guys. We love middle-aged white guys. I'm married to one. I love him dearly, but there is a certain type of culture, and there is an importance when it comes to seeing yourself in the representation of the types of organizations that you're working with. And so, again, even going back to your further point where you talk about the business actually being almost an amalgamation of helping support your younger self. Well, if your younger self was to go back again and actually walk the walk and take those steps up the career ladder and realize, hang on a minute, I've got here now and there's no one here that looks or sounds like me, even though I'm doing a good job, would you have done it all over again?
So, I wouldn't change anything that's happened in my past. I've arrived here because of it. And now that I'm the other side of 40, I'm doing a lot more getting to know myself better, if that makes sense. And just want to sort of clarify a couple of things. It was within the organisations that I was working at that seemed to single me out for being different.
Mm-hmm. And just quickly on that point, sorry to interrupt there, Mark. When you say different, you are, you look great, and I'm sure that that, especially, lost all this great weight, you're super super healthy and everything like that. But where are you from? For the listeners that aren't perhaps watching this via our YouTube channel and are just listening to the audio version on Apple or whichever podcast you're listening to, tell us a little bit about your cultural background.
Okay, so on my father's side, I'm Italian. And on my mother's side, I'm Chinese Malay. And, so I have been singled out for both races before and companies that I worked for. But that said, and growing up where I grew up, I stood out like a sore thumb as well. But that does give.
Where was that? So
I was brought up in a place called Burford, which is in the Cotswolds, which is a lovely, beautiful area. But as I said, the circumstances weren't so amazing. But now, with clients especially, the sorts of clients that I'm meeting with who are, by their very nature, very open-minded, they are business owners, they are people who sold businesses, so they do think differently. And what I found is the way I look is actually a really positive thing, because people remember me. Mm-hmm. I don't look like everyone else, so I don't get lost in this sea of sameness. Mm-hmm. So in terms of working, I remember the last role that I interviewed for before setting up the business. And before setting up the business, I had one that doesn't work and two young sons. So it was really important to me to look at all the options. So I went through an interview with a couple of private banks, and obviously I explored what setting up my own business would look like. So I could go back to my wife and say, darling, these are our options. We could go back to private banking, but this is what I really wanted to do. Thankfully, she said, her exact words were, Mark, if you don't do it now, I'm going to force you to do it. We should never set up a business. So yeah, it was the organisations themselves that were the issue, I think. The acceptance of cultural differences. I was the youngest person doing those jobs. Oh, that's right, I was going to. I had a couple of interviews with private banks. There was one bank in particular. I'd gone through the process and I was sat in front of the guy who was heading the sort of private client team at the time. Met in Canary Wharf, and I asked the chap who was interviewing me, what are your ambitions? And he said to me, well, actually, I'm at an age now where in order for me to save enough, I'm going to have to move to another country where I don't have to pay tax and really work to try and create the bonuses so that I could retire. And I remember thinking to myself, at that moment, I wouldn't want to be where you are. I want to have the freedom to create my own future in the way that I want it, not to have to do something because someone else is telling me that I have to in order to earn enough to retire the way that he wants to live. So extremely fiercely independent, my start. Yeah.
And I think it's so much more empowering, isn't it, to actually know I am in charge of my own destiny, and that won't be. And again, this is not if you're working for a company, you can still be in charge of your own destiny. But for really being able to kind of holistically actually determine exactly where you're going to go and what you're going to do, it makes a huge difference. And I love the fact that you said now you're basically embracing your uniqueness as a massive strength. And I think it's almost like it's like growing up, because I went through very similar phases of life. Probably one of the very few Chinese children in Harrogate in North Yorkshire, and coming there from Hong Kong. I mean, I tell you what, it was very different. You stick out again like a sore thumb. And I think when you're younger, you're just so focused on wanting to belong and wanting to fit in and to kind of blend in with the crowd, that you just don't see those differences as genuine strengths. But now, as you go into the real world, as it were, and into the world of work, like you say, actually people remember that you've had that interesting cultural background, and that you are a bit different. You're not part of the wash of faces that wants to sell you something within the FS market. And I think those real personal differences make a difference, that they really do. And again, thrilled to see that is really resonating with some of your clients.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that children can be really cruel, and a lot of the kids will conform to be like everyone else, and then they carry that through the rest of their lives. So we've got a challenge at the moment where my eldest son is super unique in that on non-uniform day, for example, he'll go into school in a tuxedo.
I love it.
Written his first piano concerto at age 11.
Oh my good God.
It's super unique. But there's a few kids there who are singling him out at the moment because of his differences. And what I keep saying to Thomas, I mean, he's aware that he's loved. So he has got the protection of the family, which is something that I was lacking. But I always say to him, your uniqueness is a blessing. Never, ever change. Because everything that you are right now is going to be such a massive benefit when you're older. So just keep doing what you're doing, and I'll always make sure that you're all right. It's so important.
Oh, that's so lovely. Honestly, you must be so incredibly proud.
Yeah, I'm really proud of both boys. They're both unique and brilliant in their own ways. They're super loving, and a lot of that's down to my wife, to be fair. Yeah.
Very good. And before we run out of time, Mark, 'cause I know that you and I could kind of talk for forever. I'm gonna whip into a quick lightning round. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds, if you can manage it, to answer each of the questions that I'm going to pose to you. But again, I know you listen to the show anyway, so you've probably heard some of them before. But what to you is diversity and inclusion, and even belonging, in fact?
I suppose it's being, no matter what your background, being able to be part of something where you have a shared set of goals, purposes, and values. Mm-hmm. Within our business, for example, there's obviously myself. We do have a couple of guys who are straight Brits. We've got a Portuguese guy. We've got an Indian guy. So us with different nationalities outnumber the Brits. That hasn't been something that we've done on purpose. It's just that I wanted to choose the best person for the role who fits our purpose, our vision, and our core values. Mm-hmm. That's what I would say that the inclusion and diversity bit is.
Very good. And again, you've got that eclectic mix of different cultures now around the table, which is fantastic. I'm sure there's lots more innovation from that. And again, I know you're a big fan of not only reading, but philosophy of late, especially. So, are there any key learnings? Are there any kind of specific kind of favorite books or ones that you'd like to impart upon our listeners and myself that we can go away and check out that you think have been particularly instrumental, perhaps in changing the way you look at life?
Yeah. So this year has been a massive shift. There's two books that I'm reading. One of them's called The Daily Stoic. That's basically a daily meditation. They call them meditations. They're effectively writings from the likes of Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus or Tetus, I can't remember how to pronounce it. Just reading those passages. And then what I'm doing each morning is I will write how I can apply those learnings to my life. So what Stoic philosophy is about, it's a lot about understanding what's within your sphere of control and what isn't. And those things that aren't in your sphere of control, just let them go. So I'll give you a for example. When I was younger, the decisions that I had to make because of what I was going through were life critical. And that carried with it obviously a level of anxiety. So I would think about situations and then I would imagine a lot of other situations that may occur. So I had to have everything covered. And that came with a level of anxiety. So, but I've taken that all through my life. So even within the business, I was imagining scenarios, wasting emotional energy on those scenarios that were outside of my control, and then imagining lots of other scenarios that could happen off the back of that. And actually, because it was out of my control, didn't actually matter. And the decisions that I'm making now, especially looking at things that are outside of my control, they aren't life critical anymore. And just understanding that and being able to let it go it's been massive to me. If we look at then what's in your sphere of control and understand how you can then work with that obviously appeals as a control freak piece, but it's allowing you to focus on what's relevant and what's real, and all the other stuff just doesn't matter. And that, in terms of my peace of mind and mindfulness, if you like, it's been huge. So I've been personally in the business as a result, it's been more productive this part of the year than it ever has been, or I have ever been. And for me, with as minimal stress. So that's been a massive help to me. And the great thing is I've not lost any of my hunger. That desire is still there, but I'm just able to focus on what's important and real and have more energy to throw behind that.
Very good. And I guess that's what we all want, isn't it? If we could minimize stress and increase productivity and energy, I mean, that's the ideal situation. So, okay, so the Stoic philosophy. And finally, because you had more than 30 seconds for that question, but I will let you off because it's you, Mark, is there any advice that you would give specifically to your younger self, if you could go back that far? Or indeed, if there's anyone who's listening into the podcast show today that's having a bit of a rough ride, they're not enjoying what they're doing, or they're thinking about, I don't know, a career change or what have you, what advice could you give them that you will leave us with today that could be helpful for later life, I guess?
Wow, okay. So there's a couple of bits, if that's all right. That might be more than 30 seconds again.
It's okay, Mark. It's okay. Go for it.
So the first one is just don't give up. Don't give up. Whatever obstacles are thrown in your way, don't give up. And take every opportunity to learn. Be curious. Just find out as much as you can about the subject that you want to involve yourself in, and be passionate. Find your reason why. Why are you doing it? Because if you have a strong enough reason why, you can do incredible things. You know, I'm getting up at 5:15 every morning to do my sort of morning routine and the philosophy, the stretches. I do morning affirmations and those sorts of things. So all of those. But there's a podcast that I listened to recently. I can't remember who it's from, but there's a chap being interviewed, and he said, if you want to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life and have passion, there's two questions. I keep going back to questions, but the first question was, what did you want to be when you were a child? The second one was, if I was to give you $1 billion today, what would you do to go out and change the world? Mm-hmm. So when I think about I actually wanted to be a car designer when I was a kid. But now I'm doing exactly what I want, and assuming that I get to where I want to get to, and there's no reason why I won't, because I'm thinking with a 30-year plan. If someone were to give me $1 billion to go out and change the world, I'll do exactly what I'm doing now. Because do you know what? You can have everything you want in life if you can just help enough other people get what they want. And that's something that I've stolen from Zig Ziglar. It's an amazing yeah.
I know you love Zig Ziglar. I've got some of his audiobooks, but no, it's absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah. And Mark, do you know what? That brilliant answers. as expected and as usual. And I'm sure that everyone's kind of thinking, oh, I want it to be an astronaut. I want it to be a vet, actually. But it does make you think. And, we are, without getting too philosophical, I guess, on your point, we're only here for a very finite amount of time. And so, if we're not doing something we enjoy, what's the blooming point? We may as well be enjoying what we do for those 5 days of the week. So, I guess go out and get it, make it happen.
Yeah. And also find time for you. That's the other thing.
Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us on the show today. It's been brilliant having you.
Thanks very much, Leila.
You're most welcome. And just before we head off, I'm going to do my quick summary, of which actually I've got reams and reams of things to say. So I'll just summarize, I guess, a couple of key pieces that really resonated with me. Are that if you are different in your career and if you aren't perhaps fitting the mold, well, find somewhere where you do fit in or change the dynamic. Why can't you change? Be proud of who you are. Be proud of your uniqueness. Be proud of those idiosyncratic details that you have, because do you know what? One day people will see that they are a massive, massive benefit. It's okay to be different. It's okay, to kind of put your head above the parapet and to not fit in. If you are, kind of younger and kind of, going out, I suppose, throughout your career and going into the world of work, remember that a job is not forever. It really isn't. And if you don't like something, then you have got the power and the autonomy, as Mark said previously, to change it. And if you're struggling, I guess, with trying to be successful, as I'm sure many of us are, try and look deep inside yourself and ask yourself, what is really important to me? Perhaps ask the fantastic 2 questions that I'm already thinking about that Mark mentioned. What did you want to do when you were younger? And actually someone gave you $1 billion or £1 billion, then what would you be doing now? Is it what you're doing right now, or would it change somewhat and be perhaps quite different? But ultimately, try and do something if you can, where your heart and your head are aligned. Never give up, and remember, we learn most of all often from the failures that we have. If you keep on going, keep on picking yourself up, guaranteed you will absolutely get to where you want to be. So remember, the tough times don't last, but tough people definitely do. So thank you again, Mark. It's been a pleasure having you. As always, the show notes will be at the end of today's show, all on our website. You can visit www.dialglobal.org/podcast, or you can visit www.leilamckenzie.com/podcast. This podcast, the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders Show, was brought to you by Dial Global. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.